1, 2, 3, testing the interpreting with one mic open. 1, 2, 3.
السلام عليكم دكتور مشاري، ممكن نبدأ؟
السلام ورحمة الله. واضح الصوت؟
Is my voice clear?
المتحدثين كل موجود، يعني ننطلق إن شاء الله.
Are all the speakers here? Yes, go ahead and start, please.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بداية هل الصوت واضح للجميع إن شاء الله؟
I would like to begin by asking if my voice is clear for everyone.
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد.
I welcome you all. May the mercy and blessings of God Almighty be upon you. We truly are happy that you are all here with such prominent speakers and lovely minds in this very unique group of people getting together for such an important forum. And this is an extension of practices that were based on qualitative programs by the Impact Center. And we also, of course, thank Jusur al-Tanmiya for their role in this forum. For anybody who's speaking in Arabic, there's an Arabic icon that you need to click on and choose the Arabic language. And of course, those who are speaking in English will pick the English icon. I hope that this is pretty clear for everyone. Great. At the beginning, I would like to start with an opening speech by the CEO of the Impact Center, Mr. Ahmed al-Shamrani, who will be speaking now. In the name of God, I welcome you all. Would you kindly make sure that your mic is off? Sorry, not your microphone, your speakers are off. Lower the volume. Is it better now? We still hear an echo. Is it better now? Is it better now? It is better than the previous attempt, yes. I welcome you all, and may the mercy and blessings of God Almighty be upon you. In the year 2015, the Kingdom's Vision 2030 was launched. It was launched as a roadmap for the economic and development work in the Kingdom. And it focused on three main themes: a lively community, a thriving economy, and an ambitious nation. And because it's an integrated national plan, it has set a clear role for all development sectors, including the government sector and the private sector. And it set major roles and targets for the nonprofit sector as well. Additionally, since it's an ambitious vision, it included many new development initiatives, so it was necessary for us to match said ambition and open up to the best global practices in this field. To ensure the continuous evaluation and improvement of these initiatives and utilizing the institutional learning factor to maximize the impact, we have this forum. It is the first forum of its kind to assess development, and it's the first of 5 forums that are developed for this purpose as part of the center's plan to implement the 5 forums to be held during the next year. To quickly talk about the Impact Center, it's a nonprofit center and started in 2019 to monitor and evaluate practices and also impact measurement. And it works with other partners, even outside the kingdom, not just inside, to transfer and empower the knowledge. And works to build with national capacities to monitor evaluation practices within the kingdom and focuses on the ecosystem with a lot of focus. And also thank you very much, everybody. We welcome those who are interested in working in this field and also the participants, Mr. Zaid Musa, Mr. Dennis Jobin, Professor Michael Stephens, Ms. Kinana Amin, Dr. Arif Abdullah, and Ms. Fatma Zahrani. We truly are happy with everybody here and of course our lovely guests, and I hope that you enjoy your time and find it an enriching discussion with the piece tonight to highlight the best practices. This is all to make sure that the impact is more impactful. Thank you again and enjoy yourselves.
شكرا جزيلا استاذ احمد، وكلمه فعلا وافيه وتؤكد على اهميه ودور نشر الوعي وثقافه ممارسه التقييم في برامج.
This is a very important part that is covers, and as you know, the initiative is a bit late in the region, especially in Saudi Arabia. And this forum is trying to spread the culture to understand all the practices and the concepts and all of that through previous programs and future ones. And this forum summarizes what is evaluation concepts and presents some of the practices, international practices. And since we are at the beginning, let me just allow me to explain that we have sessions. Every session will have 2 speakers, and after that we'll have a time for questions. And there is actually a Q&A icon that you can use it for it. And also, you can use the chat feature for any technical issues or any questions other than the ones for the speakers. And anything for this forum is an extension of forums that's happened before and gonna happen in the future. At the beginning, I would like to welcome the first speaker, Mr. Ziad Musa. Mr. Ziad Musa is one of the very recognized names at in the evaluation, and he is head of the academic institution, and he has extensive experience in evaluation and managing evaluations in different countries. And also he is also experienced in also Mr. Ziad had been working in many committees and established many committees, and his focus is about the evaluation concept, history, and importance, and that's going to be the title of this presentation. The mic is yours, Mr. Ziad. Good evening, all, from Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. I hope that the electricity and internet would be on our side, because I'm not sure if you are following the news. The situation situation is a bit down in Lebanon. I will start talking in the Arabic language, and I will use the standard dialect, and I prepared a couple of slides that I would like to call them just an introduction in evaluation. First of all, what is the common feature between the pictures that, or between these things that you can see? Maybe you might remember in the biggest malls and in the airports, sometimes it's asked your opinion about the service that you received, and this is an evaluation in sort of. And also you can see some ladies in other pictures who are celebrating their diploma, and everything related to education is also another form of evaluation. The Titanic is sinking. The sinking of the Titanic could be interpreted as it was a very important event in terms of although that the Titanic was designed to not sink, but it lacked a major feature to have two curved bottoms. However, after the sink, now all the vessels now adopted this new method, and that reduced the number of vessels sinking. Also, in the airline industries, the continuous learning and continuous improvement to know and recognize where are the issues that we are facing, and then learning from them. And lastly, the COVID pandemic, that kept it up, wear the mask or not, do we are the vaccines working or not? All these questions in somehow actually put evaluation at the core of the issue, and also some of the things that are common sense, and even now they do studies on aspirin, for example, because until yesterday, and this actually news is fresh off the press, was people or the scientific community thought that aspirin is going to help reducing the heart attacks. However, a research was published 2 days ago, and the finding thought that the internal bleeding for the users of aspirin are more than the benefit. And now there is a holistic review to this topic. These some examples to show that evaluation is not something that happen only in the offices and laboratories. However, it reaches every item or everything in or aspect of our lives and impact on everyone. If you would like to summarize this in a very short time, I'll just put this picture on the screen. I will ask the attendants, what do you see? We could interpret this picture as we are seeing a man who's sitting on a cloud and spilling some water, but the drought is killing the plants. So evaluation, if you'd like to describe it in a very general and simple words, is to tell this person who think or thought that he was doing the right thing. Actually, he thought on the cloud, he got the water, got and he got the plants and the pots, and everything is ready to and he's thinking that he's actually watering the plants. However, the result wasn't as he expected. So one of the interpretations of the evaluation is to ask the man to get back to the assess the situation and rearrange the situation, so we make sure that we actually receive the desirable result when we replicate the event. Let me tell you, evaluation as a profession and as a science is still growing and growing. And historically, the researchers tried to see how and when this happened. During 1792, it was the first time that was there was a marked exam in the UK. Well, many thinks that this was the first spark of the evaluation, and although that some people believe that there was some practices of evaluation, however, it wasn't framed enough to be called. The definitions, terminology related to evaluation, it used to be and still deeply connected to education, whether in general and high education. Another note on the side here, that is the word of evaluation wasn't recognized as a term in Arabic language until 1968 to find it that any glossary or dictionaries wasn't it used to have a different word, and it is much more closer to assessment rather than evaluation, and which is basically to fix something that has something wrong. However, 1968, they added the evaluation equivalence in Arabic to the dictionary, and I think now I just wanted to point out to this information, not to actually explain to you. Another note is about evaluation of development. It started after the World War II, which we called Marshall Map, and after that, the powers started to do some development in their previous colonies, between quote unquote, until we had the international organizations such as the UN and other organizations and other agencies of cooperations, institutes for non-profit, profit foundations, and all of that. Also, in the mid-90s, we started to have a national systems for monitoring and evaluations, and that showed their importance to the national planning, budgeting, policy writing, and programs and governance. So it is when we talk about evaluation, when we compare it to other professions, such as, for example, medicine, we are still very very young. Some of the historians tried to put a tree that for this topic, for this topic, and they found this tree has different roots and have three at least branches or main branches, one of which is called the epistemology, and the second related to the knowledge and from a different or from a social perspective, how do you call it, the social inquiry. And then we have the third one, which is the social accountability and responsibility. And these main branches have its own leaves or different smaller branches until we have at least three major usages of let's say three circles connected to each other, one of which is the valuing of the scientific as by itself as a science. And also there is the different methods through and we can see it through this tree. And also there are the different uses, of course, of this tree. And most of the names that we can see here on the tree, in exception to the ones who are on the main stems, they left us not long ago. Actually, some of them, some of these faces who are still live, such as Mr. Skirvin, and they are godfathers of the scientific community of development, and some of them in their 90s. And I'm one of the biggest fans, and I am proud to be Mr. Michael on the left of the slide, and he is the one who is advocating the uses. We can cover this tree for 3 to 4 days, and we will not be able to cover every thing of it. And in a parallel to this tree, you can see a lot of names of different approaches and methodologies that results from these or from this tree. And allow me, and after 25 years humbly as a profession, don't think that someone could be an expert in all of these methods, could know 20 and practice some of the some that reaches only 10, or maybe expert in 5 or 3 etc. However, it is impossible to know all of them and to be an expert, and we don't have to, in fact, to know them all. However, what we need is to know the at least the things that form the common ground between them. As we can say here, we have different methodologies, and the requirement is one thing, which is result, then results. As you can see in this picture, you can see a lot of smiley faces in a specialized conference. Could be about woman empowering or something social or any other type. And these smiley faces indicate to us to an activity and not to a result. Even if we thought, for example, that this event about women empowering, the result will be in this next picture, which shows that we changing in behaviors that we can see in this picture. And this is a result that we can call it, quote unquote, that leads us to think that to an evaluation. And so always, especially in the last 20 years, there is a huge emphasis on the approaches to know or to focus on the results. You might ask why results. We have different answers for that. First of all, we could say that if we didn't measure results, we couldn't know, or we didn't know the difference between success and failure. We might hide the failure, and then the results by itself shows all of that also. And then if we don't see the success, then we can't reward it, and vice versa. If we couldn't reward the success, that we might actually reward the failure. And then if we couldn't see actually success, then we can't learn. And if we can't learn, we can't advance, especially during the last 20 years when we added in English the word that the M and then E and M for monitoring and E for evaluation. There is a lot of agency added the L to this to emphasize the learning function from the evaluation, especially that evaluation diagnose and show where are the things that we need to learn cumulatively. Of course, if we couldn't be able to recognize failure, then we cannot correct it. And but this is very important, where if we were able to study the results, then we can convince the people with our ideas or our projects or anything that we are working on. So the results is actually the measure. The main challenge then is also to evaluate and how the results by itself, where to find the results. And this picture, I'm adding it to because these show in somehow that shows what is the development projects usually aspire for, and this will be explaining it much deeper. For example, we have a project that is either complex or simple, and this project itself could be under control. For example, how can we spend our expenditure, or to control who is going to conduct the project, and the measles, and also the quality of the interventions. However, the general purpose is to reach out to the beneficiaries who could be a targeted audience, for example, farmers and ladies, or different, or could be a targeted demography, or could be any other type of target audience. And the start from the project or the controlled circle to reach out or to make the impact reach out to the beneficiaries is not that easy, because it has to go through different levels, and each of these levels different approaches and different indicators that help us to assess based or evaluate based on them. And here the role of partners could be shown, and they are very important. And actually, I'm very happy today to see some of the partners of the Impact Center, Athar Center, because without partners, there could be an impossibility to reach out to the public opinion as a whole, or target audience, and working with partners and building systems for evaluations that tries to evaluate how can we deal with those partners, and how can we help them to until we reach out to the community in general. And that's one of the things that are very important. And what's much harder is once we whenever we moved from the control circle, we are getting closer or getting further than the impact circle. I don't want to take a lot of your time. However, because the program is very tight and very important to stick to the time. I'll just share with you 3 issues before I conclude, and it is at the core of evaluation. The first of it is it's to put the activities within its context. What you can see in this picture could be a boy who is cutting some trees, but also could be the same person who's building a mosque or a church. And from cutting the stones to the road from cutting the stones to building the church or the temple in general, or mosque, that could be the approach or method. That so the theories to change, the theories of a change now are having the light is being shed on it. And if you would like to expressly explain it, is if we want to go from cutting the stones to building the temple, we are passing through the theory of change, and the theory of change also or always has to be at the core of evaluation approaches that we are doing. The second issue is the alignment of the approaches, the evaluation approaches for the process, for the changing process. I have this good example of Martin Luther King. He didn't talk to the people and tell them, I have 3 indicators. The first one is the female or the black female could sit beside the a white woman, but he has a dream and a vision. And then less than 40 years, we had Barack Obama, the first African American to reach to the presidency office, and we don't also, we can give a perfect example also when we talk about the 2030 vision of Saudi Arabia and its aspiration. So when we deal with a vision that could go beyond programs and inputs and outputs, we have to have an alignment of the evaluation approaches with the vision. And the third issue is the social justice and at the core of the evaluation process. And we can have 2 pictures we can see here. If we would like to, if we give equality at the picture on the left for the cartoon, you will notice, so we can empower kids to watch the game. We will not reach out to the targeted result, however, and vice versa. And to the right picture, the cartoon, we can see a different approach that is tailored to different audience who to achieve the same result or the output. We can see that. So we have to believe in the approaches at the core of evaluation. Dear moderator, I would need at least 4 minutes to finish off. So is it possible for me to, if you can shorten it to the end of this paper? If you were able to summarize it in a minute, if it's possible. As we mentioned, it's a journey in evaluation world. However, the summary is everything that I mentioned, unless it is not, if it's not connected to a national evaluation system, still is going to be just papers and in the drawers. And the national evaluation system is based, of course, on development or capabilities development for the individuals, and also to have and also it depends on the initiative level, or sorry, on the policies, procedures, and frameworks, and also the legislations and power relation and social norms. And of course, it's important to create this system and to be designed to serve the national needs and a reality, and take in consideration all the national powers. And finally, in the Arabic world, there is the Eval Mina organization, and we started with 20 people, and now we have a big group of that. And I hope Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that to join this network and this big family. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ziad, for this enlightening insights. One of the best thing is for us to be realistic with our approach. Mr. Ziad, this is a novice concept in our Arab world, and it surely needs a lot of regulations, norms, and a base with the ethics and the practices. And now we are more than happy to move to Mr. Dennis Jubin, who is an evaluation specialist in the evaluation office in the United Nations Children's Fund and UNICEF. He has a lot of expertise in the humanitarian evaluation based, and has a lot of reports and published articles on the topic. You've got about 15 minutes, sir. Of course, the interpreting will be available for those who are interested in listening to this in English. Sorry, in Arabic.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Hopefully, we can see it. You let me know. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Salam alaikum. And I wish to thank the Impact Center for the invitation, and the CEO, Mr. Ahmed Al-Mshrani, and my colleague Ayat Askar, who also approached me to participate in this interesting conference. I was asked to talk about the bit evaluation standard and norm, and I did prepare a question: does standard matters, right? So I just want to put that on the table here. Essentially, what do we mean by standard? And I was looking at some definition, and I will have difficulty to find a definition of what we mean by standard. So the OECD DAC refer to a reference point in the definition of benchmark. Okay, it said the benchmark is a reference point or a standard against which performance or achievement can be assessed. Picciotto, the former vice president of the World Bank, used the Oxford Dictionary, the English dictionary, and the definition used is a thing serving as a recognized example or a principle to which other conform or should conform, or by which the accuracy or the quality of other is judged. You see, so again, it's not really a satisfactory definition. Our colleague doing a similar profession but different, the auditor in the Yellow Book, the general government agreed standard. They defined the standard as generally accepted standard as a set of systematic guidelines used by auditor when conducting audit on companies' financial record. So, sharing some of the experience. I mean, it's a recent experience. What I want to say here, I'm not going to read everything because it's a lot of material I've put, but essentially what I want to communicate here is it's a relatively recent experience. It's a young profession, the evaluation, and the evaluation function too. And in the US, standards were developed in the early 80s. Okay, it was in the 1975, and then later in 1981, the Joint Committee on Standards for Educational Evaluation has issued a standard for evaluation. These were the first standard, and they are perhaps the most influential right now. They are the ones that are used and adapted by a lot of VUP or professional association in different countries and different settings. At the beginning, it was the Evaluation of Research Society in the US, where they were focusing essentially how to professionalize the evaluation and the evaluator. It's become a profession, right? This is what we distinguish between a practice and an occupation, right? So a practice is really associated with the idea of having a profession and having a professionalization, competency, and standard across. So they will publish several standards, 55, and then the society merged later on with the to create the American Evaluation Association, which is still in existence. And the discussion on standard was very instrumental by the practitioner. There were no right or wrong with it. It's laid out with a discussion and negotiation in the early days of the American Evaluation Association to end up with the principle. So they don't call it standard, but they call it the principle for program evaluation. Later on, they add an important dimension that I will discuss later as well, is the cultural notion of standard. So the idea is there are no one size fit all that should be standardized globally, and this is the supreme standard, like the truth, but rather they need to be tailored to the context and to the user and make sense to the communities and they serve, or they are planned to be used. The other point here is it's essentially issued by the practitioner and the civil society in discussion with the government, and they come with different standards across in the society, and they discuss what does it mean to have good evaluation. Other experience rapidly in the same years, as you can see, the Swiss, the German, the French Evaluation Society are later on, which is show the point that it's relatively recent, 25 years ago or so. The UK Evaluation Society, and of course the Canadian Evaluation Society, which is developed. It's a guideline for ethical conduct, essential skills series, and the program evaluation standard in 2008. There are many others. I'm aware of the African Evaluation Association as well, have developed their own standard based on the Joint Standard Committee for Education. Other standard exists, the ENTOSAI. I'm bringing this one because it's our sister and brother from the audit side. Is different than evaluation, but it's still similar. So the ENTOSAI has their own standard. The Development Assistance Committee of the OECD have quality standard for development evaluation. The World Bank Group come up with its evaluation principle. And one closer to me right now is the UNEG, the United Nations Evaluation Group, has come up with the standard more than in 2005, so 20 years or so, a little less than 20 years, and which govern or inform the practice of evaluation in the UN system right now. They were updated recently. In 2011, if I'm correct, there were 4 new standards they were added. One on agreed principle, goals, and target, and how or program and support should be aligned with the SDG, and make sure that we support the commitment and the government partner achieving their SDG there. Human rights and gender equality, which are universally recognized value for the UN, are something that is embedded into the practice as much as possible. We also acknowledge that working as a UN, working with government partner and different partner, we also need to develop the capacity. So it's country-led evaluation, is not UN-led or donor-led, but it's really to develop. And we are about it. And of course, the professionalization, which make an emphasis on utility and use. Rapidly, how I would like to frame the problem is of the standard for the year, the last decade actually, that trust and public institution essentially, and in our leader. The COVID as well has exacerbated this, and the response to the COVID, and have showed that there's trend over. There's a perception of low trust, of credibility toward government, over when there's poor performance or corruption that lead to an erosion of trust in the society and affect the social contract. And we need to maintain trust with our citizens and having country-led evaluation and program and policies. It's important that we know that the decision makers are held to be accountable, but also know how well the policies and the program work, and if they work for all as well. So it's important to have quality evaluation that will inform what work, where, why, how, and in which circumstance, and what doesn't work as well. So standard come into that play an important role there, and play a role into the quality of evaluation. Okay, so it's important to have quality evaluation so we can provide information to the decision maker who are accountable to deliver to deliver services, yes, with the policy and the program. So here, what I'm trying to say is quality evaluation, they are useful because they promote learning, accountability, and effective contribution to the decision making. They increase trust into public institution by reducing information asymmetries between the principal and the agent, between the for example, in Canada, between the parliament and the taxpayer, or the government and the taxpayer. So there's a reduction of information asymmetries when we know the report from the government show that this policy is not working and they want to change it. So it gives us confidence toward the government because we are aware that they're trying to make it work better. So what do we mean by quality of evaluative information? And why does it matter? So there's no really good definition of quality of information, but we proposed one a few years ago, and it's based on the audit. The audit has defined what is a good audit, quality audit, what is a quality evaluation. So the joint ability that an evaluator will A, be able to evaluate, and B, report on the performance of an institutional arrangement, whether a program, a project, a policy, or an organization, by the product of his competence, his ability to assess, and by the product of his independence. So I'm highlighting these 2 points because there are a lot of standard and terms around the competence, the ability to assess, and about the ability to report and the independence, which feed directly into the credibility and quality and use, and then the trust, the notion of trust I was referring at the beginning. So rapidly, why ability to evaluate? Currently, on the quality, there's little barrier to entry. Everybody can claim himself or herself an evaluator, which is a problem. There's limited accreditation system or credential, so it's a challenge. It's a threat to quality. Another threat to ability to evaluate is evaluation budget are deficient. So if you have a team, you set up a team, but you don't give them the money to do evaluation, then you're actually affecting their capacity to evaluate. I've seen that in some context where there were team put just to meet the policy guideline, but they were not given budget. So it was pretending to be a friendly evaluator, but it was, in fact, it was not. It's free from the control of those who are responsible for the design and implementation. So the evaluator needs to be independent and really outside of what of the evaluant we call. Who are we going to evaluate, or the program or the team that is being under evaluation? And of course, there are various strata of quality, methodological, internal, external, construct validity, and statistical validity, which are very technical. Ability to report. So then there no independence. Independence is not guaranteed. The evaluation is perceived as bias, and there's no the reporting line is not independent. It's not to an oversight body, but it's to the program body. So it's affecting the perceived independence and the independence of fact we call. So it's really important because why does standard matters? Because it will feed into the quality and the credibility of an evaluation, which are directly linked to the use of an evaluation for decision making, for accountability purpose, for learning, for improving. So it is also important that standard, there are many standards, there are different contexts, different society has issued their own standard, and because they need to be culturally sensitive, they need to fit what is good in one society is not really necessarily the same as what is good in another society.
سيد دينيس
Yes.
متبقي دقيقتين. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Rapidly, I'm sharing. There are 14 standard. There are several for standard and substandard, and now in the United Nations, and they are publicly available. They are about the process, the purpose, the competency, and the reporting, the institutional environment, the organizational environment, and the individual, the competency. So I invite you to consult them and to reflect on. Rapidly again, why the standard matters. They aim to protect evaluation stakeholder and society from harmful practice. Who is an evaluator? Is it everybody? Can everybody come as pretend is an evaluator? There are basis for accountability for the good service. You can say this is not a good evaluation. I don't want to pay for it because it's not done against the standard as a commissioner, as a client. So they're educating for claim of malpractice. They provide a conceptual framework for working definition and to know what is a good evaluation from what is a bad. They provide general principle for addressing a variety of practical issue in the evaluation practice. They offer a common language in a given society, in a given context to collaborate and to work around evaluation. And more importantly, they provide earn to maintain the public confidence in the field of practice and public policy and affairs. What they should not be used for, discourage the use of professional judgment. So as an evaluator, you can use some standard, but you need to rely on your own judgment to bring to determine the value of the evaluation, of the policy, the program that one is evaluated. Limit the potential demand for alternative level of assurance, for peer review. There's still more quality assurance, peer review, post review. The GIROS is a UNICEF thing. We review the quality of our evaluation report, and don't lead to excessive procedural routine and standardization. Et voilà. Sorry for the rapid closure. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا على هذه الإضافة وعلى هذا.
Thank you for this contribution that is very deep and help us to know the evaluation standards and basis, and those two papers actually complement each other and help to one is gives basic understanding of evaluation, the other one gives us some of the basis and the evaluation standards. And now we have a question: how can we have in fact the independency of the evaluation? It is at core of the norms and standards that was just covered by Mr. Dennis. The profession by itself is a bit weird. So usually the one who require the evaluation is paying the money. So the evaluator is receiving the money and always in a tight position. So it's yeah. Sometimes you tell the truth and then and could be treated unfairly, or you say the truth or don't say the truth, and then that you're not being adhered. And as Mr. Dennis covered, it's a sea of knowledge, and there's a lot of things of standards, but the independency of evaluation is the most important thing, and we have to ensure it. For Mr. Dennis, we have a question now. As you know, there is a code of conduct and professional conduct internationally, and each organization have their own code of conduct. Do you think it's better to unify these code of conducts for as a one, and then these standards can be adapted to the context of each country and their practices in their country? Or do you think that each country should create their code of ethics and standards and basis individually?
Thank you for the question. It's a good question, and I'm not sure I will have a good answer to that. I think it's a bit of both. I think while there's a need for harmonization across practice, like I said, if you take the tree that Ziad showed and the branch about the valuing, if evaluation is about the value, determining the value of a program, of a policy, but what is a good program in Canada is not the same thing. Well, first within Canada, for example, with Aboriginal communities, they may have a different definition, different understanding, and outside globally with the American, with the Latino, with Saudi Arabia, and so on. So I think there's a need to have some harmonization and the discussion, but there's also a need to have a tailored, context-specific, and this is the importance of the cultural point. What is 55% maybe for me in my culture is good. Is 55% is more than half, but in other culture maybe it's 70% is a good performance. So there's no truth here. It's really through negotiation as a community and within a country, even within the country, there's different context, cultural community, and you need to take into account the various perspectives because there's no truth. There's only a multiplicity of truth, I will say. I hope my answer is satisfactory. Over.
Thank you, Sir Dennis. وأيضا أضيف سؤال Sir Dennis إنه في
I would like to add, thank you, first of all. I would like to add a question. In Saudi Arabia, the evaluation practice is new in Saudi Arabia. So it's like we are starting from the zero. So if we wanted to create a good code of conduct, what are the code of conducts that could be used as a base that we can build upon and to be utilized in Saudi Arabia, of course?
I think many of those I refer and those I did not refer could be used. The joint standard for education was the basis because it stands from the other, the UNEG, but you really need to use this to prompt your mind and your discussion and to find out your own path. I think they are they could inform the discussion, but you will need to find, and I'm sure you will come up with your own better standard that will make sense to you and in your community and country.
شكرا دينيس شكرا استاذ زياد.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. Thank you, Mr. Ziad. And now we will take a break for 10 minutes and then we will be back. Thank you very much.
شكرا.
Hello, Mr. Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Hello, how are you? Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. No problem at all.
Okay. As you know, there is a translation in this conference, so I would like to ask you to go to the English room. You use your computer, right?
Yes, I've already found it. No worries. I'm quite used to the system now.
Yes, in the bottom, there is the global sign language interpretation.
Yeah, I saw that. That's fine.
You have
Thank you.
to click on it and go to the English room.
Yeah.
So, where are you now in the English room?
I am. Yeah, I am.
Yes, thank
Recording stopped.
السلام عليكم. أهلا وسهلا
Recording in
فيكم في
progress.
الجلسة الثانية التي تحمل عنوان التقييم من منظور عالمي، عرض التجارب الناجحة في ممارسة تقييم البرامج التنموية عالميا. راح يكون معنا إن شاء الله.
Welcome to the second session. We will have 4 speakers at this session. We'll start with Mr. Michael Stephens. Mr. Michael will be talking about monitoring and evaluation in the EU, and he's the head of the culture and social protection at the EU at Afghanistan. Also, he's an expert in he has an extensive experience of 12 years and more than that, and also he has experience in project management and worked extensively in creating policies of evaluation and financial policies. Mr. Michael, you have 15 minutes for your presentation. The mic is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I will give you a quick overview on how we run evaluations in the EU and what are the challenges in getting colleagues to really engage fully in evaluations and also engaging implementers and beneficiaries. Now, for me, increasingly, I think the problem with evaluation in general is that, there is a strong focus on upward accountability. So in our programs, we are primarily focused on the attainment of proper financial means. So basically, the donor will ask the implementers, have you used the money to create the right outputs? And then that's where the story quite often is stopping. So we kind of get stuck on the output level, and we're not looking any further. I would say even in organizations like the EU, you can see that this is even institutionalized to an extent. So you have quite strong financial units that will also launch audits, and evaluations kind of run alongside. So you could say maybe the auditors have somehow taken over a little bit. Now, the good thing about that is we have different levels in the EU that are engaged in evaluation. And in delegations, we have actually a chance to go a little bit further and to look a little bit more granular, because the way the system is built is that the bigger evaluations are all run by our headquarters. So headquarters will launch larger evaluations on thematic issues, country evaluations, etc. And we will actually launch evaluations that focus on projects or on programs. And that allows us, of course, to go a little bit deeper on what has actually changed in the process of the program. So here we could actually then introduce a focus on downward accountability, which would be in the attainment of results for beneficiaries. So particularly for final beneficiaries. And that is, of course, something that we should be concerned about, because that is why we're really doing development work. We want to achieve results. And ideally, these results should be also relevant to the beneficiaries. So there are various ways we can do that. I would say in an ideal case, it could be something that is more of a participatory process where beneficiaries also get a say in terms of valuing the programs they receive, in terms of giving feedback, what could be changing in order to improve the results that are attained. And of course, it could also involve much more civil society organizations or other organizations that work on similar topics. Now, in parallel to what we do in evaluation, there's a larger stream of work also with civil society organizations in monitoring government programs. And this comes usually under the chapter of, or under the title of community-based monitoring. Now, community-based monitoring, by definition, includes beneficiaries much more than evaluation does. So it does, for example, do social audits, it does large-scale surveys, it does community scorecards, etc. And each of these different instruments is actually meant to double-check with beneficiaries whether they're receiving the results they would like to see. And I find that quite interesting. That is actually something that evaluations could tap into and could look into into a little bit more, and could also partially use these elements in larger scale evaluations at country level. But I would say this is only possible if you focus on a sector, you focus on a particular program that is in a, based in a sector or part of a larger government effort. And it is, of course, particularly useful when you look at service delivery. Now, the struggle with that is, of course, that the way we do evaluations at country level is very much driven by the people working in our offices in country. And they usually are very busy people that do evaluations alongside of their normal work. So for this, the EU has actually institutionalized a so-called network of monitoring evaluation correspondents, and I'm one of them in Iraq actually at the moment. And yeah, I mean, this of course allows us to give like an incentive to colleagues to look at particular methodologies or to run evaluations in a different way, and to also consider different types of reaching out to program beneficiaries. Now, we have piloted this with a number of evaluations now in different countries, and different colleagues in this network are trying different methodologies to look a little bit more at the outcome level or look even at the results level. And that was actually quite useful. So we found, focusing, for example, on one project and focusing on outcomes can be much more beneficial than looking at the program as a whole and asking the questions about all the different 5 DUC criteria. Now, the other thing which is interesting, if you look at our monitoring system, that is essentially doing exactly that on a much smaller scale, but it's actually a results-oriented monitoring system for over 10, 15 years now. And the methodology has been refined, but has always been remained in terms of focusing on results. And quite often we get actually stimulus from these different monitoring missions, which are often only 10 days long, for our programming as a result of that. Now, we could call our monitoring reports actually mini evaluations, and we could again learn from them to do larger scale efforts in that same direction. Now, why is there such a strong focus on upward accountability, so accountability to donors rather than downward accountability in terms of accountability to beneficiaries? That's probably something that is related to, partially also how our institution has grown, what we have experienced in the past. I mean, there were, of course, also incidences where we thought, okay, it's more important to look where the money goes and whether it's used properly. But to go one step further and actually to say, okay, what have we actually achieved with the money invested? That's of course also takes an extra effort, and it's often not just a quantitative, but also qualitative way of looking at things. And it needs resources. It needs also people willing to engage with us on these type of evaluations. So it's a bit of an uphill struggle, of course. But having been through one or two of these exercises, I must say it's been quite rewarding and interesting. And it would be good, of course, if there's a general move towards doing more of this work and doing more participatory work, looking more into engaging also final beneficiaries in providing feedback. So this will be my short contribution today. If you want to know much more about how the EU runs its evaluations, now that's a very complex system. But as I said, in country offices, we do actually have the advantage to experiment a little bit. And I think that's also deliberately set up like that, because we have this larger cloud of overarching evaluations that are actually managed from headquarters.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. الآن معنا الأستاذة كنان.
And now we have Ms. Ganana. who is the team leader in monitoring and
Kenan
evaluation
is
at USAID.
has 23
She has over 23 years
of experience
expertise in this line of work. She also leads international teams by the United Nations and had many and several rewards when it comes to creating policies. And she will start now. She has about 15 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Shari, and good evening, everyone. Excuse me and allow me to speak in English this evening. It's an easier language for me. I would like to today talk about how we view evaluation and monitoring within USAID. I will share my screen now, hopefully. I would like to start by talking about who we are at the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. Why do we do monitoring and evaluation and learning? How do we do it? And how does it apply to nonprofit organizations and other organizations such as yourselves attending today? So the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, we are the U.S. government's arm for providing development assistance to the countries in which we operate. We give our funding directly to the governments in which we, in the countries in which we work, or to other profit or non-profit organizations that implement our programs in a variety of different areas, such as water, energy, health, education, women's empowerment, environment, governance, and others. We currently operate in about 100 countries around the world. How do we do our programming and our funding? We basically, it's a program cycle. We have a country strategy that we developed together with our local partners within the countries in which we work. Then we have projects and activities that implement and help us achieve this strategy. And we have monitoring and evaluation that feeds into our programming and design, but also comes back to feed into our strategy as we develop it. Our strategies are 5-year-long strategies. Feeding into the strategies and the tools that we use for these strategies and the programming are our development policies, the human and the financial resources that we have, the budget, the financial budget that we use for the programming, and obviously the evidence and the data from our programs. At the heart of all of this is trying to our effort to achieve results, and then we use the modality of collaborating, learning, and adapting. And I believe Mr. Ziad mentioned the learning earlier as well. So the U.S. Congress provides money, gives it to USAID, and then USAID then provides the money through for-profit firms, through NGOs and civil society organizations, or directly to the host government or the government in the country in which we operate. When we start working in a country, we develop, as I mentioned, a country development cooperation strategy. This defines our results, what we want to achieve over the 5 years, the life of the strategy, how do we want to achieve it, what kinds of results we expect, what's the vision for this, and basically summarizes our portfolio and our approach to achieving this strategy. In developing the strategy, we also developed what we call a performance management plan, which is basically how we are going to do monitoring to measure the progress against our performance, and also to look at the operational context in which we work. How are we going to evaluate our performance and the impact of our work, and what kind of learning from this evidence we want to achieve. It includes our development hypothesis or theory of change that Mr. Ziad also mentioned, how we are going to achieve what we want and why we want to achieve it, and what's the process and the approach for achieving it. We use this performance monitoring and evaluation plan to inform our decision making, to determine how we want to use our budget, and how we want to divide it up between our different programs. But we also use it to learn from it and to adapt our programs as we move forward at the strategic level, realizing that development is not a linear process. And we used to always continuously monitor for the context in which we operate, how our programs are doing, and if we need to make any changes or adaptations along the way as we implement our programs. We develop a results framework, what we call a results framework. It's a logic model of what is our highest goal that we want to achieve, what are development objectives, the various development objectives for a specific country that we work in, and what are some lower level results that we want to achieve to help us achieve that development objective. Then moving to the programming side, we have activities which are basically agreements or contracts that we provide, like I said, to either the host government that we work with, or to a for-profit or non-profit organization that helps us implement the program that we want to achieve. Each of our activities and programs have to develop their own monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan that informs their own monitoring, their own process, their own learning, but also feeds into and contributes to our mission, the country level performance monitoring plan, and eventually it feeds into the entire organizations or USAID agency as a whole, our learning and monitoring and evaluation process. An activity can feed into multiple results through our program, and multiple activities can feed into the similar or the same results. So hopefully looking at each of the activities, how are we going to achieve that lower level results and consequently achieving the higher level development objective and our strategic goal in the country. So why do we do monitoring, evaluation, and learning? Many of the speakers today talked about accountability and transparency. It's accountability to our stakeholders. They include the US Congress and the American government, which provided the money to USAID to implement our programs. But we also have accountability and transparency to our stakeholders, which is the beneficiaries and the local partners with whom we work and in each of the countries, to show them and to indicate the progress against our and how are we using our funding efficiently and effectively. A few years ago, we also added the learning piece, which also Mr. Ziad mentioned earlier, which is to realizing that we cannot just be doing accountability or transparency. We need to look at the learning and how our program is moving and what kind of evidence we're generating. And also, as USAID as an agency, we want to be part of this evidence base or building evidence across the globe of how development programs are working or not working and where is progress, basically. As I said, we have the three elements. Monitoring. Monitoring is ongoing. We collect data, routine collection of data to indicate the progress against which we are working and achieving our results. This is happening across the life of the activity or program or project that we implement. And it's usually being done, or the data is being collected for this through the implementing partner that we're working with. So for example, through the for-profit organization or the non-profit organization that we work with, or some of their subcontractors and sub-grantees. Then we also have the evaluation. This is a systematic collection of information that helps us judge and identify the effectiveness of our program and informs our decision making. It happens at a specific time throughout the program or the activity, and For USAID, this evaluation has to happen through an outside or third party, a third party, basically not USAID implementing it and not the program that's being evaluated. It has to be a third objective party. We have several types of evaluations at USAID. One is an impact evaluation, which basically is a rigorous counterfactual assessment that looks at cause and effect models and how we have attribution to our programs. We have performance evaluations, which is basically a wide range of performance of evaluation methodologies that looks at process or the performance. It's more of a qualitative approach. And then we also have a variety of different tools to measure and evaluate our programs that such as most significant change, outcome mapping, outcome harvesting, and what have you. I just want to touch a little bit on the impact evaluation because we at USAID do it slightly differently, which is basically, for example, if we want to evaluate the impact of our training of teachers on the student learning outcomes, reading skills, for example. So we develop a treatment and a control group. We do a baseline survey at the beginning of the program before we do any kind of intervention. And then we conduct training for the treatment group, but we don't do, for example, the training of the teachers in the control group. And then we do another set of surveys to test for example, the students and see how their learning has improved. And with that, we can define if our program has really impacted the learning outcome of the students, or there are other factors that impacted that. And then finally, the learning piece, which is a continuous process that happens across the life of the program and really looks at the evaluation findings, looks at the monitoring findings, looks at the variety of different modalities and tools, and gives us a time to pause and reflect on our programs and to really think critically about how our activities are moving forward. How we do this is basically we have monitoring, evaluation, and learning teams within each of our countries. Each of our programs is expected to also have at least one monitoring and evaluation learning specialist, if not a team, depending on the complexity of the program or the project. This team helps set up the systems, helps design the evaluation and the monitoring tools, follows up and works with stakeholders. We verify the data through visits and data quality assessments. We also collect the data, the raw data, and analyze and evaluate and report on this data, and keep and maintain the program files and records. So how is all this relevant to you? Basically, you have a vision or a goal or an objective that you want to achieve, such as for example, Saudi Vision 2030. And the monitoring, evaluation, and learning helps you track your progress against this. It helps you learn from your successes and failures. It helps you improve your programs and implementations as you adapt. It helps you be accountable to your stakeholders, your funders, and beneficiaries. And as Mr. Ziad also mentioned earlier, the power of measuring results is really, if you're not measuring your results, you're not able to tell success from failure. You're not able to see the success, and if you're not able to see the success, you're not able to learn from it. And if you're not able to see the failure, you're not able to correct it. And thank you for this, and I'm happy to answer any questions later.
شكرا جزيلا أستاذ كنان على هذا الإضافة وهذه اللمسة وهذا التكامل بين.
Thank you very much, Kanana, for all this. It truly does complement Michael's work as well. Mr. Dukan will talk about he will talk about his portion of today's sessions. He is the Program Project Manager at the Global Evaluation Initiative. He's also a previous manager with lots of experience in social justice and general management and a lot of relevant causes. Your mic is all yours, Mr. Dukan. You've got 15 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak to the session today.
Okay, Mr. Dogan, I
I'm
would like
going to share my screen, and I want to take the opportunity to.
Mr. Dogan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I would like to ask you to go to the English room. In the bottom of the Zoom, there is a language interpretation, like a global sign. You have to click on it. Yes, you have to click on language interpretation and go to the English room. We have a translation in the session.
I thought I was there.
You have to stop sharing.
I am in the English room.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You can share now.
Okay. So I want to talk briefly about the Global Evaluation Initiative, which is the program that I lead at the Independent Evaluation Group of the World Bank. The Global Evaluation Initiative is a program that aims to build the ability of countries to monitor and evaluate their interventions. And it's been going for about a year. We are a partnership created with the United Nations Development Program, and we work with a range of donors, country governments, civil society organizations, and others, including a group of UN agencies who also share an interest in monitoring and evaluation. What we're guided by is a belief that if you have a system in place that delivers good evidence, good information, good knowledge, you'll be in a position to develop better policies, and better policies will be implemented, and that will lead to improvements in people's lives. So the GEI is dedicated to helping countries put the systems and frameworks and processes in place that will help them produce better evidence. All of this is part of a commitment that we share to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Sustainable Development Goals obviously are not something everybody is committed to, but they're a very useful way of thinking about how we want to change, what kinds of results we want to deliver, like Michael was talking about, and exactly what kinds of targets we can set for ourselves. So the Sustainable Development Goals, and you don't have to take the whole package, you can just take the goals that are relevant for you, are ways of thinking about how you want to structure your program. And it's not only about governments, it's also a very useful framework for civil society organizations, communities, higher education institutions, private sector players to think about their own results and their performance. One of the things we know is that while many entities are committed to the Sustainable Development Goals, they don't have systems in place that allow them to track their performance against those targets. And so what we are engaged in is trying to build the systems that allow them to do that. So our mission is to bring together governments, citizens, and experts to support countries in strengthening evaluation and monitoring systems and building their capacities. The people who are involved in monitoring and evaluation systems are very diverse. Often, as many of us experience, firstly, they are government entities, and oftentimes they are particularly either entities at the center of government, or sometimes they are line ministries. So there'll be a component in the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Education, or social security that has a function called monitoring and evaluation. It's often linked, as Kanana said, to learning or with strategy and planning. So monitoring and evaluation is often a governmental function. But there are other people that we need to work with when we want to build M&E capacity. That includes practitioners, people who do evaluations. And I don't know how it is where you are, but where I'm from, which is South Africa, we don't have much in the way of evaluation capacity. It's something we really need to build. And I'm not familiar with the Saudi context particularly, but I would guess that getting more people involved in evaluation would also be a good idea there. There are also in many places what we call VOPs, voluntary organizations for professional evaluation. And I see that one of the big names in the VOP world, Ziad Musa, is on the call, and he's very welcome. But what M&E associations do is they provide a voice for evaluation practitioners and a way for them to express themselves and to build the ecosystem in which they operate. Then there are multilateral and bilateral organizations, there are academic institutions, and of course, in some places, the private sector plays a very important role in monitoring and evaluation systems. So when you're talking about building M&E capacity, what you're really talking about is building all of these people. And it's obviously a complicated long-term job. I was asked to speak particularly on the concept of impact. And so I want to just slow down for a minute and talk about what we mean when we say impact. And I've got 5 points I want to make about the word impact. Firstly, you'll discover when you talk about impact and impact evaluation in particular, that people say the same word, but they mean different things. So as Kanana was saying, sometimes when people talk about impact, they mean the difference in a situation with the thing that's being evaluated compared to the situation without the thing that's being evaluated. And that we call a counterfactual based approach to evaluation. For other people, when they talk about impact, they simply mean the long-term results that's been achieved. And that's more of the sort of impact that Michael was talking about when he was talking about the EU's monitoring processes. That's really looking at what kinds of results are achieved. And you'll have noticed when Michael was speaking, he talked a lot about results. And he didn't really use the word impact so much. But in many instances, people talk about impact in different ways. When you talk about impact and you use the word impact, what you're really expressing is your understanding of a development process and what you value. Many people think it's more important to hear the story of somebody who's been involved in a program. And when you want to measure impact, you go and you talk to the actual individual human who was involved in that program, and they will be in a position to tell you about the impact of that program. For other people, that's not the case. Their worldview is one that values statistical rigor, that is highly rational and based on data, and they would be more likely to do a household survey and compare the situation with and without the intervention. So when you choose to really doing is you're giving life to your own understanding of it's important that when you talk about impact evaluation, that you take care to clarify exactly what people mean when they talk about impact. Often, for people who have a more qualitative approach, impact is something that is achieved over time. It's a time-bound concept that emerges in 3 to 4 to 5 years, whereas people who take a more counterfactual-based approach will be interested in impacts that have been delivered often more quickly. And so the point is in my third block there, where I'm saying that what you really are talking about has to be clarified. A conversation as a practitioner about what your evaluand means when they talk about impact really needs to be undertaken. But having said that, I think you'll know that impact is increasingly a concept that everybody uses. They use it in government, they use it in NGOs, and they use it in the private sector. And so this use of the term impact is more widespread, but at the same time, what people really mean when they talk about it doesn't get the kind of care and attention that it really requires. What you will note though, and it's something, as somebody who's worked mostly in government and the public sector, I'm noticing more and more in the private sector, is that investments that are intended to achieve social results are also starting to speak about impact in ways they didn't used to. So for example, when you talk about the kinds of reporting that a corporate does, there's the emergence of what was previously called triple bottom line, where you would talk about the impacts on profitability, people, and the planet. Now people talk about something that they describe as ESG, environmental, social, and governance reporting. And people also talk about responsible investment, which is investment that doesn't invest in firearms, alcohol, tobacco, or various other kinds of social ills. And in those kinds of spaces, ESG, responsible investment, and increasingly in impact investing, people are very concerned about getting clarity on the term impact and making sure that there's a shared understanding. So you'll see, for example, the Global Impact Investing Network, GIIN, is doing a lot of work on developing metrics so that people can measure the impacts of a profit-generating investment. So what are the different ways of measuring impact? Michael, the first speaker on this call, was talking about the EU's approach, which is quite monitoring oriented. And interestingly, he was emphasizing the role that citizens play in the way the EU does their work. And then when Kanana was speaking, she was describing the different kinds of evaluations that USAID does. And that was pretty interesting. She was talking about impact evaluations, performance evaluations, and then other kinds of evaluations. And I would argue that when you are choosing how you do an evaluation, you need to be very clear on what the question you're answering is. This slide actually was stolen directly off Twitter by me. I just thought it captured so well what I wanted to say that I plunked it in my presentation. It's by a consulting firm called Quadrant Conseil, which makes the point that there are different methods for answering different questions. Now, when you do an evaluation, the key thing you need to identify at the outset of the evaluation, amongst a number of other things, is what is the key evaluation question? What is the actual purpose of this evaluative exercise? What are you trying to find out? And so what this slide describes is 4 different questions that can be answered through evaluative techniques. The first is wanting to find out if the intervention really made a difference. And if it did make a difference, how much of a difference does it make? The second question that you can answer through an evaluation is if you want to know what configuration of the intervention worked best, which means you know your intervention does have an effect, but you want to know how to blend it and mix it. What kind of combinations or configuration is going to deliver the best result? The third question an evaluation can answer is you want to know why and how the intervention made the expected difference. So it's a different area of focus in your question. You know that your intervention has a positive result, but you want to know how that positive result was delivered and why it achieved that outcome. And the fourth question that you can answer through an evaluation is you want to know what were the consequences. all of the consequences, desirable and desirable, or as they say in evaluation, intended and unintended. And depending which of these types of questions you want to have answered, you're going to choose an evaluative technique, or what some people call a method or an approach that is going to deliver that result. And what this slide describes is a decision tree that is going to lead you to a particular option. And I'm not going to take you through each slide. This is available. I can share this slide with you, or if you look for me on Twitter, I'm dfraser1. You'll see the slide up. I actually tweeted it recently. But amongst the options that will tell you if an intervention really made a difference and to what extent are the more what Kanana called counterfactual based approaches. And so they're looking at longitudinal studies. You can have a randomized controlled trial that's experimental or quasi-experimental.
Sayyid Togan, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. You can do regression discontinuity or difference in difference. These are different statistical techniques. You can look at different forms of regressions. You can do qualitative comparative analysis or cross-case analysis. And then in the third column, there are various qualitative approaches to evaluation that are much more consultative and participatory. The last is when you want to know everything that happened. There are techniques like outcome harvesting, most significant change, and concept mapping. So these are all ways of doing evaluation. If you're interested to learn more, I suggest you look on the betterevaluation.org website. I'll type the name of the website into the chat box. But the thing is, be clear on what you want to measure and why you want to undertake this exercise, because that is going to shape what you do as an evaluation and how you're going to use the findings. I'm very happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you very much, سيد توغان، على هذه الورقة العميقة التي تؤسس لتقييم الأثر، بدءا من مفهوم تقييم الأثر وكيف نستخدمه ومتى.
Thank you for this presentation. And now we can move to the fourth paper of this session, and it's titled The British Experience, a National Experience for ENAP into supporting the evaluation processes, with Mr. Arif bin Abdullah. He's an experienced in this field, and he supervised on many programs in the strategic planning, that is, and different programs and project managements on higher level. And so, Mr. Arif, you have 15 minutes to present your paper. I am glad to participate in this event. I actually love these presentations and engaging in them. I'm also glad to have such an event and to be a part of it. My presentation is going to be built on a summary of a lot of experiences, a long experience to support capabilities in evaluation sector. And in this school, we had a lot of work. Mr. Adil. Mr. Arif, there is, I think, an echo and the voice is not clear. My role today is to to share some of my experiences.
هل الصوت أحسن الآن؟
الآن ممتاز، تفضل.
حسنا،
نعم.
معذرة. غاية اليوم إني أعرض عليكم العديد من أو خلاصة التجارب
Today I'll try to give you an experience, a summary of my experience of the INAP, and I'll try to give a summary of the INAP. It's a university at Quebec, independent, that is in Quebec, and also it works in the general administration and research in it, and engagement of experiences and capabilities in the general administration and governance and everything in related to the theory of change and other related theories. The school had a deep experience, an extensive experience since 2010, about 10 years of experience in evaluation, and the started with IFAD, a program which is a program that been developed on different levels, and the main goal of it is to close the gap of the evaluation to support the capabilities and in the francophonic countries in the African continent and other countries who speak French. And all of these experiences, there was a lot of things that help us to develop a lot of processes in relation to evaluation. Most of the work that have been done in the school that was related to the general administration and the governmental institutions who were or who are working in development, developing processes, and as you know, most of these countries were headed toward developing capabilities in the field of the general administration and policy making in these countries who speak French. And our experience was different, and was extraordinary, to be honest, in relation to or with cooperation of Athar Center to create the first Arabic language of the program, the evaluation program, and called Taqyim, which is the Arabic word that equivalent to evaluation. We were honored to participate in this experience. The first time sharing this program was in June, and was shared with people who are experienced in evaluation, and was targeted toward them and in the African in the Arab countries in Africa. And also we've have done or held a workshop with Athar Center in Riyadh, and we think this program is going to have a bright future. The first focus, so I can focus my participation and to make it much clearer, to share some of the points of my experience. The first thing that the key thing that was key to us was to apply or to build the experience up and to train the specialists and the admins and many organizations. And we were working on two sides, the demand and of evaluation, and it is usually related to the governmental agencies, and also from the other side on the individuals who were able to provide offer for the evaluation on a highest level with a great methodology and a clear norms, and the presenters who presented today actually covered most of these items. Since a few years back until we reached to we have a good number of trainees, and now the importance the focus is now to go beyond training and go beyond that, and what is after training. And with our experience and our with different institutions, whether they are governmental, or semi-governmental, or even NGOs, we noticed that training by itself cannot actually create a huge change. Only training some of the trainees is not enough to create a capability, an effective capability in different institutions who are paying for the evaluation, and to create policies to build on results and evidence based on good information that is as a result of evaluation program. So now the interest is moving gradually toward developing what we would like to call it the ENAP school, what we call it the apprenticeship, to create to finish the evaluation. Some of our experiences at the beginning was closely related and fully related to the monitoring systems or high, for example, the governmental agencies of monitoring, such as some of countries have courts and some of them has specialized agencies. We worked with them. However, why these agencies, the high agencies of monitoring? Because many countries have changed in their policies and assigned these parties to perform the evaluations, and many of them have built their work on facilitating all the to be able to use all the results of these evaluations, the different evaluations, and their impact on the assessments, and all of them are connected to the development in general. Gradually, we had some of the experiences in North Africa, in the Middle East, or the Arabic countries in Africa, and whether in Cote d'Ivoire and other countries such as Cote d'Ivoire and other and in Morocco, Tunisia, Djibouti, Congo, and there was a lot of experiences, applied experiences, that showed the new experiences on the levels of developing the capabilities, not only for training, but through practice and apprenticeship. And this is to support the and to support the evaluation system in general. So there is a special challenge in and so we can talk more about what we call a true practice of evaluation without only raising emblems and and to showcase actually the best approaches and the best practices on reality, and to be more realistic in the work and working in the institutions. فبالتالي so we have to try to build also and develop and keep developing, and not only to adhere to talking about evaluation, rather than and actually start practicing in the field. And this is what we think is the biggest challenge in relation to the evaluation process in general. Of course, I am happy to share with the listeners or participants in general with these results of these experiences. We hope that we will have a research. We will have some of papers that are going to be published soon, and we can share it with you. And we also Other Center, the Impact Center, have an agreement to translate some of these summaries of our experiences, and we hope that's going to be beneficial for our work, and also if it can be replicated, hopefully in similar situation, can be useful in different fields. In relation to the program that is called Taqeem, the Arabic word equivalent of evaluation, which was the challenge of creating a program that support to train the human capabilities and actually create these capabilities and support them to support the capabilities in Arabic. The challenges was on different levels, and I think we are at the beginning of the road, and we are still facing this challenge. But we are working on that track. The first challenge was on the terminology level in our Arab world and in the Middle East region. We have different approaches in creating or to dealing with terminology, and this could limit the process of creating to a new terminology or accommodating new terminology. And that's one of the biggest challenges that will, to be honest, a bit tough, and we are still working. We already started working on it. We have some achievements here and there, but we are still categorize it as a challenge. And we really would like to take this opportunity to thank Jusur Tanmiya, the development bridges and impact center, Athar Center, for their support in this relation. However, there are different challenges also that we are facing. For example, writing researches in Arabic and to create it more localized to the Arabic locale, and also aligned it with the Arabic context. That's one of the challenges that we are trying to work on it, and to create some of the experiences in this field so we can create successes in this issue. Also, there are a different challenge on in supporting some of the policies that supports actually the evaluation programs and monitoring. When we talk about the national ones, and in different countries, Arabic countries, and we hope that we can be supported and so we can from a policy perspective, so we can create demand on evaluation. It is possible. It is not hard. We can work on it and help to achieve it, to align all the already existing knowledge on Arabic level, and also bringing or align it with the international and the good practices in the globe or around the globe. I would like to stop here. I hope I provided some knowledge here, and I'm willing to answer the questions if there are any. Thank you, Mr. Arif. I think you took us through a wonderful journey about the practices of the school, and I think by the end of the paper you talked about two key points that we would think we focus that it's going to be translated and is going to be published through Athar Center, and also the challenges that you mentioned actually was very informative. I would like also, we have two questions. The first one, maybe it is directed to Mr. Dokan. It is a question, and I think it's very important question for evaluating programs. When to start evaluating the impact of a program? It's always a posed question for all the specialists. Is it by the end of the program, or 3 months, or 6 months from the beginning? Or let's say, is there a known timeline that we know that we can start the evaluation?
Thank you so much for the question. The best time to start evaluating a program is now. You always want to make sure that you've got baseline information that will allow you to understand the situation at the start of the intervention. So it makes good sense to do an initial study that describes the situation before you did anything. But many of us are not, that don't have such good foresight, and we haven't been able to do that kind of work in many instances. And often programs start.
Mr. Dogan, I think the voice is not clear. It's kind of robotic. So if you can help us.
Yes, we can't hear you.
No.
Thank you, Ms. Huda. I can talk with Mr. Dogan. Thanks.
We can't hear Mr. Dogan. We can't hear you.
Now we can't hear you, Mr. Dogan.
You can't hear?
Now it's
we
good.
can
Now it's
clearly,
good.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Mhm.
Yeah, now it's clear.
Okay.
Okay.
What I said was that the best time to start evaluating a program is now, because you always want to do a baseline study so that you can understand the situation before the intervention was implemented. But oftentimes we don't get an opportunity to do a baseline study. And so oftentimes what you really need to be doing is, and this relates to some of the things Michael was talking about in his presentation, is you want to be doing thorough, rigorous, thoughtful monitoring that will help you collect data that you can use to inform your evaluation later. But we often think of evaluations as what are described as summative exercises, meaning that they provide you a summary overview of what has been done. But you can also do formative evaluations, and those are evaluations that allow you to inform or describe or plan the intervention better. So I think we want to get to a place where we understand evaluation to be a broader practice that's part of program design, that's related in well to program management, and that's part of the overall agenda of generating evidence for good decision making. And evaluations don't have to simply be huge, big events that happen every few years that are done by external consultants. You can also practice what gets called evaluative thinking. And those are that's ways of thinking about an intervention that allows you to assess what it was that you were seeking to achieve, to develop ways of measuring those results, and suffusing your approach to your program management and your program implementation with an evaluative mindset. So think differently about evaluation, think about it more creatively, be more open-minded about what constitutes an evaluation. And I think you'll find that, you know, they say that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So I'm encouraging people to build their capacity by learning different ways of doing evaluation, learning how this relates to program planning and management, and overall being more open to evidence-informed decision-making, with evidence being very widely framed.
Yeah, I could maybe come in on that because I think I can give quite a good example on this. I mean, we had a results-oriented monitoring mission in Afghanistan on a program that was actually trying to rehabilitate or reintegrate young offenders coming out of prison. So then we sent this monitor into the field, and he was like, 20 years in the business. As I said, we are using mostly qualitative monitoring method in the EU with this results-oriented monitoring, and it's orientated a little bit alongside the DUC criteria. So it looks for effectiveness, efficiency, and so on. But if you have somebody experienced as that, he does exactly that. I mean, he looks first at the intervention logic and he applies evaluative thinking. So looking at the intervention logic, he was saying like, well, I mean, they're only working with young offenders coming out of prison. Why they don't never look into the upstream, how do kids even end up in prison? So then when he actually went to the field, he talked to some of the young offenders they were working with, and he was asking them, so how did you end up in prison? And most of them were just saying, well, we didn't have food, so I was stealing a telephone to sell it. I stole an apple, and things like that. So for kind of very obvious reasons, these people were ending up in prison for no good reason, actually. So basically he was saying, why don't you work on the upstream and you basically bring the kids off the street instead of just working with people coming out of prison? Because the problem is, when these kids come into prison in Afghanistan, or at that point, they were actually getting in contact with the wrong people. And they were already so much into the wrong circle that it was difficult to reintegrate them in society. So you could, at that point, it was basically, with a large proportion of these kids, it was too late. And so the intervention logic wasn't actually working. So I think, there to have a lot of observations that you then contextualize, and then you look back at the log frame and you ask the very obvious question, is this intervention logic actually working? That can be actually quite a powerful thing. And it has to be somebody from the outside, because people in the inside of the program, they'd be pulling all different strings and all sorts of things to make this intervention logic work. They never find the strengths to actually turn around to the boss and say, well, you know what, this intervention logic will never work, okay? So luckily, we could, in this case, actually directly work with this implementer, because we're just starting a new program. And they were then primarily focusing on street kids, actually, preventing them to end up in prison. And it was a much better program.
Thank you. شكرا جزيلا وأعتذر
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the very tight time frame. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Dokan. Thank you, Ms. Kinana and Mr. Arif. We glad that we had the opportunity to listen to you. Now we have a 10 minutes break, and then after that, we'll come back again to continue our third session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم. نبدأ الآن في الجلسة الختامية.
Now we'll start with the concluding session with the topic of practices of evaluation in Saudi Arabia, and we will have two guests. The first one is Engineer Ahmed Al Shamrani and Mrs. Fatima Al Zahrani. Mr. Ahmed Al Shamrani, he will be talking about Athar Center and their role, and he is the CEO of Athar Center, and also worked in different organizations worked in different entities in Saudi, and more than 16 years of experience in building capabilities and governance and establishing project management offices. Mr. Ahmed, you have 25 minutes in your presentation. Welcome everyone, good evening. Before I start, in covering the topic and showcasing the Athar Center, would like to, the Athar Center, I would like actually to give a context of Saudi Arabia, just to help us to understand the overall topic. So first of all, I'll just give you why this center exists and how it started. During 2015 in Saudi Arabia, we had the Vision 2030, which created a roadmap for the economic work and developing and social and environmental works in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And this vision are based on three bases, and these three bases, there is 6 general goals, and when we talk about society, there is items related to it, and when we talk about economy, we have also other than and also when we talk about it, the all of these general goals, there is the six general goals. We have 27 detailed objects, and after this second level we have a third level, so 96 detailed objects, and also under these 96 we have a huge number of KPIs, and each of these 96 items has at least 5 to 6 KPIs to measure them. And to achieve this vision, there is many executive programs, and they conduct their work through related agencies, and all of them cooperate to achieve the goals of the vision. When we look at this vision, we know it's huge, and this vision is aiming at creating huge changing and creating a change, and all of that to achieve Saudi model for development. And just to understand the size of these goals, I will show you some of them. And they are very ambitious, and some of them is to raise the average age from 74 to above than that, and also for the pilgrimage to add them, and also to have 3 Saudi cities within the first the best 100 cities, and also to exercises and sports from 13 to 40%, and also the contribution of small and medium establishment or businesses from 20 to 30%, and things related to female empowerment, and many other ambitious goals. And also the vision included all these sectors, governmental, non-governmental, and even non-profit sector. And to raise the GDP and to have and also to under these goals, for the non-profit goals, there are KPIs and detailed goals, and also to ensure the vision to be successful. There is at least four guidelines. So any program of the vision cannot be approved unless it go with it. First of all, it has to be smart objective. The second of which is accountability and enabling accountability. What was aimed and what is the goal that was designed or was informed in establishing the program. And the accountability as a concept is cannot we say that any agency can say that they achieved the goal successfully. They have to refer back to the KPIs and to showcase how they actually were successful or not. And also there is the third thing is the account and dependency analysis, and this is because the vision is huge. So there is there is dependency, high dependency, and has to be administrated greatly. And we also noticed that these rails follow the result-based management. And also the fourth one is called monitoring, and it's a state actually impact measurement, and it applies on all the programs, and anything falls under the Saudi Vision 2030, whether they are fall in the governmental, non-governmental, non-profit sectors. So as we are still speaking during 2015, and there was to assess the non-profit work, and then there was a huge cooperation to adapt all of these guidelines. And there was a huge effort also to recognize the role of the non-profit work. And four of the biggest non-profits in Saudi participated in creating this research center, and providing capabilities and abilities that we needed to start the work. Also during that period, there was establishing and planning for the roles of the center, and what are the opportunities and that can be benefited from the centers. And then the message were developed or was developed at that time. This is the change, the theory of the center. It's it is detailed and shows the strategic and midterm and close terms targets. I'm not gonna spend time on it. These are some of the enabling goals that is the practice. Also the to achieve the goals from a very soon time, create many approaches or methodologies, and benchmarked with the global practice and good practices. And finally, we used some of the evaluation of the OECD DAC as a main methodology. Why? Because we think it is the best one that's suitable to support the goals of the Vision 2030, and to make or to help us with the aim of creating or making the center global. However, what we did is we tailored it to a Saudi context. It's much like a Saudi t-shirt. And then this should help us to achieve our goals. And all of that establishing work, we created this vision as a non-profit agency who is focused on creating impact, and not only for us as a center, but also for why we are exist and how can we benefit the final beneficiary. And and the overall goal is to creating the impact of the work. And for our, we planned to achieve this message through having three things. First of all, building capabilities of the individuals and then organizations, and lastly is the environment, the development or developing environment, and the environment. These topics, I will cover them one by one. When we talk about individual enabling, and we focus on working with experts and a specialist story of the work, and also we train them for monitoring. We have a program for Suhail, and that is programming a program for training. That's we achieved six, or already conducted 6 sessions out of 20 sessions that are planned for the 12 next months. And also the second program is to develop and to work with INAP University, the International Bank of Development. Also, we conducted a program, a training program that was extended for 15 days of training, and it is still and there is at least 4 programs that are planned to be conducted in the next 12 months. Also, there are programs that fundamental and fundamentally build the capacity of the trainees to make them under direct supervision of experienced trainees. There are some challenges that we are facing. What we are working in is kind of limited in the region, and also there are other challenges, big challenges, in fact, to switch the theory into an application, also to build the communities of professionals, which is, and to create a community of practice within the individuals. There is a challenge in this area, and to create these communities. And also there are other challenges related to translation, as mentioned with Mr. Arif, and to reach out to the terminology and resources. Also, the second topic, which is enabling organization, that's the list of works that we are doing to support this topic. First of all, the core of it is developing individuals, and the goal is to create teams and units of monitoring and systems of monitoring and evaluation systems inside these organizations. And these teams usually are chosen by the project management, and we think it could be or should there should be a participation also, and a huge awareness by the executive administration. And also it's very important to focus on the monitoring systems, and it shouldn't be flooded with works that can be delayed. The challenge here, the real one, is to actually ensure benefit out of these practices, because the core of this practice is to enhance and develop the work of this organization. If we created only these units, they wouldn't, it's not enough to achieve the goal of it, because the main goal of it is to support decision making. And it's very important to make these units very agile, and they should represent the activity of the the organization. And also it's very important to focus on the developing planning from different items, the alignment with the needs of the beneficiaries, and the alignments with the efficiency raising, and then moving to the internal efficiency and to make interventions within the organization, which will create sustainability within the organization. And then we can move to focus to measure the impact. So it's very important before the impact measurement, we need to make sure that these interventions were their impacts were already created and and so they can do their part in policy making and raising the efficiency and achieving their goal. And the challenges that we facing in the enabling the organizations, one of which is the that many of these organizations are adapting to the organizational look rather than the best practices or good practice. Also, to ensure a challenge to ensure to the used the issuing of reports and using these reports for developing and to align them with the planning rather than to only focusing on the impact measurement. And the last topic here, we have the environment enabling, which is raising the awareness of these practices of impact, the impact. And also we are working on providing Arabic resources that is usable for these guides, and we have 15 of these guides trying to be translated, and we found 5 of them that they are suitable, need to be translated. And also the goal here is to create a great understanding and allowing connecting the development for all the sectors, whether they are governmental or non-governmental or even non-profitable sector. The goal also is to document and publish and sharing knowledge, and this is one of the biggest challenges, and also to share the success stories so we can ensure the continuity of these practices, and to create supporting policies of such practices, or the policies, and enabling these policies. The challenges for enabling the environment is to focus on the impact only or on the results only. And I think on all developing work, we shouldn't focus only on the results. I think that it should be the focus on getting the impact of these interventions and programs and works. And also another challenge of accountability and enhancing accountability and its understandings, and to work within activating the role of the governmental agencies, and also the connecting the demand with the demand and the practitioners. And also there is a challenge to create the policies and support the policies that support such practices and create a community of practices, and also to raise the awareness of not rushing results, because some results needs a lot of time. And also another challenge of enriching the culture of publishing and researching, and also the biggest one of the biggest challenge that is already, I think, mentioned by Mr. Doga, for example, is to provide a good number of experienced professionals who understand the context of the country, and the another challenge of the good practice in planning that in this field. This is all I have. Thank you very much for your participation and you showing your interest. And if there is anything that I can share. These are some of the resources that we develop them and Arabize it and translate it and make it aligned with the Saudi context. And these publications worked with with many of our partners, such as the International Bank and other agencies. Thank you again for your listening.
شكرا سعادة المهندس أحمد الشمراني. حقيقة أبرز ما
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And indeed, one of the best things in the center's experience is how they started this awareness ripple effect, and also empowering those who will, in order, empower others with their practices, whether it's development practices or other practices, and of course empowering the organizations. And this is one of the biggest projects that the center will be working on, in line with the nation's horizons, and of course the reporting and translation and translation of knowledge as well. So now we will move to Ms. Fatma Zahrani. She is a researcher as well as an analyst in the field of measuring the impact of regulations in the Ministry of Justice. Please go ahead. Hello, peace and blessings be upon you all. My name is Fatma Az-Zahrani, and as our brother here said, I am a researcher and data analyst. I've participated in lots of projects. I've designed a lot of methodologies and tools that are needed and required for the success of evaluation processes. So I will talk about how that evaluation as a process is something that is not just where I work, not just within the governmental sector, but in all the other ones as well. Just give me a few seconds so I start sharing my screen, please. Are you able to see my screen? Yes, clear. Thank you. Apologies. So to begin, I'm going to speak a few points during this presentation, but first I'd like to speak about the word regulation here and how it might be confused with legislation. So it's the number or group of rules that are binding and would a binding of individuals or parties under the legal system. So authorities in the country are three kinds. You've got the jurisdiction one, you've got the executive one, and the organizational one. Usually within the kingdom, the king is the core of this process of legislations coming out. This wouldn't go, the process wouldn't go without a royal decree. And so all such regulations and decrees would come from the king himself. This is just a very brief introduction before I dive into my main points, which is the governmental obligation to assess the impact of legislation. By the way, as an interpreting comment, she keeps using the word legislation, but I am aware that RIA stands for regulations, so I will use the term interchangeably. I will also go over the ideal RIA methodology and the recommendations and challenges in practice. When it comes to speaking of the government's commitment to such legislations, then we take into account quite a few things. So whenever a legislation is passed, there has to be a support from all levels of the government, not just the highest level. And locally in Saudi, we've got, I can definitely say that the adoption of measuring the RIA is a reflection of the governmental commitment to reforms, and serious reforms, if I might even say, on multiple levels. And in 2014, which is the Hijri year of 1435, when it comes to studying the projects, there was resolution 265. We've got two resolutions in front of us, the first one of which, resolution 713, is the updated version of what I just mentioned, the other one in 2015, which shows it helps and facilitates the creating the framework for okay, it doesn't carry the name regulatory framework assessment, but it does in itself carry the same set of actions and meaning. So as you see, you've got the first one, controls to be to be taken into account when preparing and studying draft laws, regulations, and the like. And this was updated recently in 1438 Hijri. And the other one, yeah, so that's 713. It covers the most important technical regulations, as I just mentioned, that have to do with preparing and studying draft laws. But the second one, that is resolution 476, has to do with amendments to what needs to be taken into account when preparing and studying draft laws, regulations, and so on. And it was updated in the same year. I've looked at this with a gap analyzing eye, but probably can't speak too much about it, especially with how much of a limited time frame I've got. Therefore, I will not get too much into it, but I might speak about where it overlaps with the global resolutions or regulations. The first point would be looking into the global benchmarks and taking these kind of studies, so benchmark studies, into consideration to look at financial aspects, the social aspects, and other ones, and also committing to, we must look into adhering into revelations and to reflect the kingdom's commitment on a global scale. And there would be a lot of drive from through competitive means before setting such legislations, and then letting everybody know and making sure that such studies are conducted by experts and those who have the suitable qualifications. And this will facilitate studying these legislation and then would be able to be exposed in more concentration. It's the National Center for Documents, and on their website, you can look up these resolutions by number. Again, the numbers on the screen are 713 and 476, so that you can read about it in more details. There are, of course, quite a few local studies, not enough, but it's quite a motivational start that will bring about much change and more studies for us to reach that level of ideal methodology that we would like to achieve. And now we will move to the second point, which is how we could design the methodology or the ideal methodology to evaluate RIA. We need to first have identify the legislative needs, and then look into alternatives, and then prepare for the post-decision making phase. I probably jumped quite a few steps, but I will give the summary of it though. I will cover the regulatory impact analysis. First, we've got analyzing the legislative or regulatory need. So first, we've got determining the legislative need, and then determining the objectives of evaluating and measuring the legislation under consideration, then define the problem and the possible scenarios. And then we've got determining the legislative need, determining the objectives of the evaluation, and ask ourselves a few questions. The selection. This is a continuous guide to remind those in charge of evaluation and decision making that a plan is in process. And it makes sure that we've got all the alternatives on the table, and not just on the table, but thoroughly studied as well. And this will mean to achieve a means to achieve an end, not an end in itself, to justify previously preferred options as well. This way, the option that they go for, or the recommendation, would be justified. The more options we've got, the harder it may be to measure the impact accurately. And this is just the beginning of the KPIs, especially if the objective was identified or defined by the SMART method. So the beginning of the performance indicator chart for the legislative impact assessment process. As we said, especially if that goal was defined by the SMART method, it needs to be measurable, achievable, and has a time frame with stages. And then we've got determining the legislative regulatory need. We need to first define the problem and what the possible scenarios for this problem are. And this road creates a roadmap that outlines the parameters for the type of intervention that should be undertaken to solve the problem or issue under consideration. And it gives us several scenarios. It builds us a baseline for that by creating a basic scenario, a best scenario, and a worst case scenario. It also helps us design as well as assign the list of questions needed for both the problem identification stage as well as formulating scenario. You've got the World Bank and the European Commission and other global organizations are pioneers when it comes to this, and we can follow their lead when it comes to using the benchmarks and KPIs as well. So questions like, why is it a problem? How big is it? Is its scope? And what are the causes? Who are the affected people? What are the international local trends to solve this problem? Here, these questions come into place. And as I said previously, the global organizations could help us ask some of these questions. I believe that any evaluator could get into phrasing these legislations with more confidence if they did have a solid base with lots of proof and input, noting that having several options need to be balanced by serious adoption of a good methodology. The more details we have of studying such options, the more confidence we would have in such selections, and we would have a very good answer or a justification to why this specific option is the one we went for. There are a number of questions and answers one could ask to measure the impact. Some of the approaches might be more quantitative or qualitative, but that will differ from one legislation to another. It has to do with things like the number of those affected, as well as the efficiency and and effectiveness of such legislation. So what happens afterwards in the future after issuing such legislations. And this brings us to the third step, which is the after effect, what happens after taking the legislation or it going into effect. We don't want the result to be nobody succeeded. So what we do need to do is we need to determine any alternative options and evaluate their effects as well, determine these options, whether it is in a legislative or non-legislative way, to achieve the objectives of the project as a whole, whether it's a new legislation, an amendment, or an existing legislation, and also look even into the financial aspect of it, taking it into consideration. And this includes studies that look into what is the domino effect of every legislative decision, how it would exhaust human resources or finances, and the expected commitment of organizations at different levels, and knowing the reactions as well. This is very important, of all stakeholders and influencers, as well as having a prepared justification, a rational one, of what would explain the failure in case that happens. And when I give examples, I'm talking, the examples are available from credited sources, and perhaps on another day where I have more time, I will talk more about that. For me as a practitioner, it's very important to speak about the local experience in Saudi, it's important for me to speak about the challenges in Saudi. For the top challenge, in my personal opinion, and I believe it is the same across the board with all other evaluators as well, I believe the biggest challenge is the lack or absence of the raw data available, as well as lack of cadres and specialized competencies to prepare such studies, along with how limited time is to complete all stages of these evaluation processes and evaluation methodologies within a reasonable period of time, and especially with some projects being quite big. We also need to mention that there's a lack of sufficient clarity as to what are the rules and regulations that are excluded from the evaluation study processes, especially with projects that perhaps are underway. So total or partial processes. And this is also a very important challenge. I've prepared more challenges, but I've covered only a few of these points. In the last point that I'm going to share with you, it is the recommendations point, and I hope that we have more support in adopting them, which include, first and foremost, is utilizing the current available data. So we exploit all types of available data, whether that was paper, electronic, and automating the governance within a common and perhaps an easily accessible base, even for the general public, as well as adjusting communication channels and facilitating such communication processes on both internal and external levels. Also, planning in advance, that is a very important point for me personally, for the preparation of draft regulations to ensure the application of the principles with much transparency. And back to the facilitating point, it also involves staying away from bureaucracy when it comes to communication and following up on implementation, the decisions. Last but not least, there's also naming the regulations that are excluded, whether they are excluded in total or partially from the evaluation processes, and including them in the decision supporting the implementation, perhaps, of the legislative impact evaluation. So it's very important to update any legislations, any decrees, and make sure that everybody is within the loop, rather than naming them, putting them under the umbrella of creating studies, so that we have more targeted studies, knowing what it is complete and what is excluded in total and partial. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please go ahead and let me know, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thank you very much, Ms. Fatma. We do enjoy you pointing out the details and how impact measurement is reflected within the legislative ecosystem in Saudi Arabia. We are in front of practices, regulations, laws, where impact measurement definitely helps a lot before these decrees come out, and obviously also after and during as well. So making sure that they are in line and works well for the purposes they're created and for the target group. How these legislations are made is something that definitely needs a lot of effort poured into, as you mentioned. We've got two questions for Mr. Ahmed. Does the center measure its own impact? And how can we get the KPIs you previously mentioned in the presentations? For the first question, there's quite an issue when it comes to the practices we want everybody to apply. So the center has a theory of change that it wants to implement, and it has a follow-up and monitoring process and approach, a methodology, so to speak, that it follows. And this system has about 60 KPIs, and these KPIs, we measure and monitor things constantly. It's not a one-off thing because we have several points and themes that we monitor to measure change rather than measuring it over only a certain a little time. But this is extended, and we have goals, and we have so many KPIs. We have about 60 indicators, and we use these indicators. And I believe that any development, any business in the development sector that look into interventions and the intervention's impact on the ultimate beneficiary or the final beneficiary, then it is very important for them to adopt such a methodology. We have 5 resources that we will cover soon and elaborate on it on the center's website. So do follow us on these websites, and you will have the ability to reach these resources pretty soon. There's another question. When it comes to your role as an NGO, could the center help societies with measuring their impact, or will you empower these societies or civil societies to measure their own impact? This has to do with the first theme or the first point. We've got programs where we target training more than 400 practitioners to do monitoring and evaluation. We started with this and we finished about 6 programs, but there are more chances to participate and enroll in such programs. And this covers several sectors, whether it's the governmental one or the NGOs. They could sign up and enroll in such programs. And as I said, registration is still open. And also you can absolutely reach out to the center on social media. The second aspect is, as you said, we do also empower such organizations, and we've got this happening over the next 12 months to start the foundations and get things into an operational phase to evaluate within these NGOs. We finished the studies to find whether they are prepared or not, and we did an initial testing for the first and second batch of these organizations. And again, the chance is still available for these organizations to enroll and participate in such programs. And of course, as I said, we do the training, but we also empower. So both aspects, I would say, to answer your questions. And we also look into the post-training phase, and we make sure that we can still help these trainees to practice and implement what we have trained them to do and be able to help them with that process. So now we will look into the recommendations towards the very end of this forum, when we talked about the ethics at first, and then we spoke about international practices, and at the very end we got to the local practices, and at the very end we have a few points we'd like to mention. There are so many methodologies that one does not need to know every method, but the best thing to do is to know the status quo and the current best practices that would work for specific approaches, and also look into the KPIs and have indices and indicators ready. And as we've mentioned, there are lists of these and benchmarks. And we also talked about how important, and we highlighted the importance of quality when it comes to the impact and studying it, and how at the beginning we could do some governance on a smaller scale, then expand it to a bigger one, and how knowledge transition is quite important. And these studies are very important for the decision-making process. And it's not just at the beginning, but throughout and after as well. And how the evaluations do help with the sustainability and long-term life of these projects that are evaluated. Thinking of impact is also a very wide-scale thing that reflects different views of the world and shows different goals that are relevant to sustainability, whether it is global organizations or local parties. We also spoke about how it is important for empowering organizations, individuals, and the governmental ecosystems to make the make the suitable decisions and empower the right parties. And we also mentioned about automating the governance process and to make sure that transparency and communication is facilitated between different governmental sectors, also the non-governmental ones, so that whether it's paper documents or e-ones, these are some of the many recommendations that we mentioned today. I do thank each and every one of the speakers, and I do thank Athar Center or the Impact Center, and thank you very much to Jasur Development as well. And I do believe we would need so much more time, but this is such a good beginning, a good initiation to starting the dialogue. Do not forget the hashtag for this program on Twitter, and you can use it for questions and inquiries, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. We thank all the experts and we welcome all your questions. Anything on your mind, please send it over. And we do apologize, we did get a lot of questions and couldn't cover them all, but hopefully we'll cover them in coming meetings. Thank you very much.